Okay, thank you, Char. Electric Mermaid MC Derek Hanebury is a Alberni writer of poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction, who taught writing here at North Island College for many years. His latest book, Both Sides Now, is a collectible of short fictions with two of his past students. His upcoming solo editing something else altogether has actually already come out. So I don't know what he's working on now. Take it away, Derek.
Thanks, Karl. Actually, something else altogether is still coming out.
Oh, it is? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Not to worry. All good. All good. Thank you, man. And welcome, everybody, again. Great to have such a healthy turnout tonight. And I think we've got things organized now in terms of the order. Of course, as soon as this begins, my cat comes and starts to claw on my leg. This is the beauty of Zoom. Okay, yes, I love you too. Okay. So we're coming to you from Port Alberni, the literal and literary navel of Vancouver Island, and also on the unceded territory of the Hupashet and the Sishat First Nations. So we're grateful to them for sharing their traditional territories with us, and grateful that we can all come together tonight and have this platform to hear each other's work and inspire each other. Cat's playing with the wires on the. Okay. So, yeah, Electric Mermaid, for those of you who might not know and are wondering about that name, it has to do with that, with Luma, who you can see in Char's window there, the Electric Mermaid that's hanging in the rafters at Char's Landing, where we normally gather in person and haven't been able to. Well, actually, we started to be able to again, and now we're back to doing all the Zoom thing, but it's all right. We will persist and survive, and one day we'll all be together again, right? We keep hoping. So we've got some great readers lined up tonight, including our Victoria writer, Wendy Donawa, poet, who was just recently longlisted, or actually you got shortlisted for the Poetry Prize for the Federation of BC Writers. Congratulations. And I see the finalists, the list finally came out, and well, you weren't first, but you were darn close, so congratulations. And we also have Jenny Cummings coming tonight from Texas, and she's going to share with us her work on her novel that has been published, and we're looking forward to hearing that. And so I'm not going to say much more other than welcome everybody. Let's relax and have a good time. Reminder that the chat box is open on the side there, so you can throw your comments up in the chat whenever you'd like. And Char is going to be making sure that whoever's reading is going to be big in the screen, and the rest of us will be small. And for those of you who might not be familiar with Zoom, I think most of us are by now, but up in the right-hand corner, there's a view button, and you can select what kind of view you'd like to have, whether it's gallery or the other. So just play with that and see what you're most comfortable with. So if I have this right, Barbra Pelman, welcome. You're going to be our first reader tonight. And where are you coming to us from? Are you in Victoria, Barbra?
Yes, I'm in Victoria. It was a great shock to say, oh yeah, I'd like to. I need to go later or earlier, and then suddenly I'm first. So anyway, but that's fine. So yes, I'm coming from the unceded territory of the Esquimalt Nation, living in Esquimalt in Victoria.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, well, I'm going to turn the Zoom screen over to you, Barbra, and we're looking forward to hearing your work.
Okay. So in honor of Wendy reading tonight, I have a triglossa, so which is kind of a little bit of a lazy glossa. So instead of borrowing 4 lines, you borrow 3 lines. And it works in the same way that a glossa does, in that the last line of each of 3 stanzas are the borrowed lines. This poem is called And Yet, and the 3 borrowed lines are from Wendy's poem Puru Paints Zong Kui, which is from her first book. Perhaps there is only the demonic journey, small beauties by the roadside, and such love as we can muster. And yet, It's dangerous these days to check the morning news. Verbal rants in the checkout line, alliances broken by nasty words, children torn from parents' arms. Kindness and goodness seem as old-fashioned as petticoats and muskets. Women and students march to save their dignity, their lives. Perhaps there is only the demonic journey, from worse to worse, things unraveling like skeins of old wool, the still center no longer still, no longer safe. Young women at college advised, walk together, call a cop, keep your keys in your hands. And yet, a policeman walks a line of ducklings across the road. A man rescues a child, not his own. Queen Anne's lace and wild iris, small beauties by the roadside, and fresh peaches at a stand near Karameus. We gather good news, cherish it the way we cherish our children, the way we look for love. There's a baby boom of whales, though the ice sheet is melting. Water can be made from desert air. Farms can grow vertically under the sea. How to protect our planet, trees and flowers and birds and all things give such love as we can muster. That poem was written a year ago, and so some of the references, somewhat dated, but they still tend to be horribly true still. Okay, and one more. This poem came out in the Malahat Review a year ago, and some of you who know me know that I have a very, very ancient mother. She's 105. And so this poem came last year on our usual evening phone call. She lives in Vancouver, and I call her every night. She has dementia and she has bad hearing, so you can imagine. The poem is called, How Do You Pronounce COVID? How do you pronounce COVID, my mother asks, when she finally remembers what she read 10 minutes ago, and then forgets again. When will you come to visit me? When? She continues. I can't. The virus. What virus? What? There is nothing familiar for her to hang on to. Around her, the world slows to a speed she knows well. Take a walk, notice the leaves returning, the crows on the lawn. She used to bring breadcrumbs for them, but she's forgotten that. When are you coming? When? The walls around me are greening, sun every morning, and the small seeds perk out of their peat pods. I am in kindergarten again. The roots go down, the leaves go up, and I sit on the back stairs, placing seeds, their stems still with their soil hats on, into larger pots. Spread out a little more, as we spread out less, each in our small green pots, hoping for transformation. Thank you, and thank you for letting me be on the Electric Mermaid with all of you.
That was wonderful, Barbara. Thank you. And that was perfect for a lead off, I think. You know, it was Faulkner who said you always need to leave your reader uplifted. And I always feel like art should, you know, although it needs to highlight what's dark as well, but yours is very uplifting. I feel better already after hearing those two poems, so thank you. All right, so we're going to go on to Anne Hopkison now from Planet Earth, and Anne, welcome. We're really tickled to have you here, and can't wait to hear you read.
Thank you, and it's great to be here, and thanks. I don't actually have to leave until 7:15. I can just eat my dinner quickly and be on Planet Earth Poetry at 7:30.
The beauty of Zoom.
I hope to hear plenty of you.
Okay.
I've written a couple of poems about walking in my neighborhood, and this one is called Walking the Neighborhood #1. In December, neighbors hang Christmas lights and place inflatable characters in their front gardens. Angels, elves, and reindeer, puffy and sweet. Santa and Mrs. Claus on a Harley. Straining their plastic seams, inflatables wobble in a winter breeze. They make me think of inflated prices and inflated expectations of the season. A purple hippo stands in a ring of shining candy canes under palm trees wrapped in burlap. Not his usual biome, not his usual meal. One house has a shipload of pirates in red and green. Across the street, Mickey and Minnie cuddle under mistletoe. We walk at night, elated by lights and more lights, enlivened by cold air and memories strung out over the years. Even in these strange times, a reservoir of festive spirit filled with family dinners and genuine joy swells once again. We are pumped for the holidays. In January, we feel a bit deflated, flat as morning after champagne, Yuletide energy snuffed out by 2 weeks of excess. Lawn inflatables mimic our letdown. They leak air and shrink. They sag, like relatives who have overeaten for 4 days in a row. 12-foot-tall T-Rex with Santa in his jaws shrivels toward the ground, a slow extinction event. Mary and Joseph slump onto the holly bush. Daylight reveals flaccid snowmen on the lawn like a giant's discarded condoms. Deflated, collapsed, they are ready to be tucked into Rubbermaid tubs until next December. We walk the neighborhood, tuck our holiday spirit away rather than see it wither. Already we look for the first snowdrops of spring.
Super. Thank you, Anne. That was great. And I don't know if it was the same in Victoria this year, but up here, people seem to leave their lights out a lot longer. Like normally by, a couple of days after New Year's, everything disappears, but there's still quite a few out and about. And maybe because the kids went back late, they left them up longer too, but certainly helps.
I'm good with the lights. I think the lights are wonderful. It's those flopped over inflatables that just drive me crazy.
Well, ironically, I read a piece just before Christmas and used the same simile there. The inflatables were like spent condoms. I said on, so we're on the same wavelength, totally. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, and all the best with Planet Earth tonight. I'm sure it's going to be good.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. All right, and third, but by no means least, our own local Linda Thompson, resident Port Alberni poet. I think we should make you the poet laureate, Linda. I don't know.
Oh, I
We
accept.
don't have one yet. All right. We'll W honorary poet laureate of Port Alberni. So I trust you're going to read from your book tonight.
No, I'm not.
All right. We'll take whatever you got for us.
Okay, well, I think I'll read this. It's a poem I wrote a few years ago when I went to a writing workshop in Italy and went through Rome. And it was at the time when they were choosing the Pope. And as I told the woman at the desk, I was going on 2 tours of the Vatican that day. And she said, oh dear, most people don't do that. It was so hot. Anyways, this is what I ended up writing. Spreadsheet for semi-miracles. It's true, we were a kind of mishmash, a lumpy mix of Presbyterian, Baptist, atheist, with some far-off Catholic phantoms. But we were not without our own odd miracle or two. Mother had a certain touch. She brought a long-gone red-necked slider named Tony back to life when we finally found him 3 months down the living room heat register, popped him into some tepid water, and he puffed right up into his old self again, clambering up onto his mason jar lid, smacking up celery and dead flies with his bony turtle mouth. And there was No Name the goldfish. Like St. Francis, Mum had a knack for pet-centered work. There was a teary kerfuffle the morning we found him, floating belly up in the bowl. There on the counter, between the Rice Krispies and the cod liver oil, Mum rolled out of bed, lit up a menthol, yelled at us all to shut up, then sprinkled No Name with a pinch of baking soda. One burp and he was belly down, cruising his castle turrets with cocky, fishy slaloms. Oh, and what about the student ministers? God, yes, truly are miracles in the flesh. They came to town in May after a winter of theological pop quizzes and too much KD, ready to serve and save, amen. The love of God lighting their ecclesiastical brows. They glowed behind the pulpit like backlit Persian cats. Jan and me, in our dull Keith twin sets and Sunday undies, we never felt closer to Jesus. I wasn't thinking much about the Pope when I toured the Vatican last August. Now I can't seem to stop, watching every news show, filing every detail up here. The blessed Gamarellis hunched over, stitching cassocks since 1798, one bellissimo stitch at a time. Socks of the finest long fibered cotton warming those holy toes, and the red, blood of the martyrs' red shoes, the weapons weight crucifixes, the purple and red, the black and white. My insomnia has been a blessing. Now when I wake at 2 a.m., it's like I have good homework to do. But what do I really want? Haven't I been secretly proud to be an atheist? Well, okay, but for sure an agnostic. I may have lost my mind. I keep wondering how it would feel to wrap my arms around his middle, rest my head on that warm velvet mosetta. Would he take kindly to a has-been Protestant, a woman with so much on her mind, a woman who flirts with sloth, envy, pride, the works? Would he pat my back, murmur, see, in a nicely modulated voice? That would be a kind of miracle, wouldn't it? Thank you.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you, Linda. That was great. That's got to go into a book for sure. I could see a whole series around that one. Fabulous. Okay, so we're going to move into our featured readers now. And I think we better start with Jenny, because Jenny, you're down in Texas there. What time is it down in Texas right now?
A couple hours later than where it is right there, where you are.
Right. So yeah, you're heading past 8 o'clock. That's almost getting past my bedtime. I don't know about you, but yeah. Anyway, we're really happy to have you here with us on the Electric Mermaid, Jenny. And
well, thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing from your novel. So tell us a little bit about your book. So it's called Just Jackie, and I'm sure that's not a reference to your friend Jackie Carmichael.
No, it's not. Just Jackie, my life is like a fruitcake. Okay.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll maybe let you tell us a little bit about it, and then read for a bit, and then if you're all right with having a few questions afterwards,
Sure.
maybe take a bit. That'll be great.
Okay.
So maybe about 10 minutes of reading, 10 minutes of questions.
Sure.
Super.
All
right. So
well, thank you so much for having me here, because what a wonderful forum you have for readers and writers, and this is a great thing. And I love the name Electric Mermaid, by the way. That's clever. Yes, I also want to thank Charlene and Derek, Karl, and Jackie for putting this together and inviting me here tonight. When you say I'm from Texas, first of all, I want you to know I'm very South Texas. If I was any further south, I would be in Mexico. And I can truthfully say, if it wasn't for all the buildings, the way I can see Mexico from here. So, but you know, it's beautiful here. It's flat and a lot of palm trees. But when I visited Vancouver several years ago, I thought I was in heaven. I tell you, y'all have a beautiful, beautiful place. It is gorgeous. Well, anyway, first of all, I have started writing and decided to become a writer when I was 12 years old. So that was a long time ago. A friend of mine and I decided we'd write a mystery book. You know, we like Nancy Drew, so we'd write our own series of mystery stories. And our career ended when we couldn't decide whose name would come first on the book. So it took me about several decades, retirement, and a pandemic to get back to writing. So I did that. And the only thing I'd ever tackled was writing a novel. So that was a real challenge. And I had written a screenplay for a screenwriting class I'd taken. I thought, well, that's going to be I'll turn that into a book. And I sat down working on that. And I had an outline, a plan. You know, I had the whole book decided. And my characters just started taking me in another direction. So what I came out with was not what I started out to write. But I'm really glad it's out, and it's fun to do this, and I'm glad to have a chance to talk to you about it tonight. Well, first of all, let's start about that. Well, she's sweet as sweet Texas tea, tart-tongued and prone to mishaps. Our heroine, Jackie Jackson, is a hot mess. Her imperfections are monumental, and her imagination too vivid for her own good. She talks to herself and loses the arguments. She howls at the moon, and her cusses are as sharp as hooey and bullcorn. You know, this romp through Jackie's past, Just Jackie, is packed with rowdy friends, romantic disappointments, heartaches and tough breaks, spiritual insights and comic relief. Her life is like a fruitcake. It's pretty nutty, occasionally crummy, and oh so sweet in those moments when she gets it right. Tonight I'm reading from a scene when nothing goes right. New Year's Eve finds Jackie home alone, drowning her sorrows in a liquored up rum and brandy fruitcake. Oh yeah, and she eats the whole thing. She hasn't slept in weeks and finally drifts off into a restful snooze. And then the clock strikes midnight. The booming, crackling sounds of fireworks wake me from the best sleep I've had in weeks. One ear-splitting kaboom shakes the house like a micro-earthquake. The howling of neighborhood dogs forms a chorus with the whooshing and crackling explosions that echo throughout the block. I take a moment to rejoice. Thank you, Lord, for getting me through these challenging times, I say, clasping my hands in prayer and looking upward. Yes, I am grateful that a difficult year officially ends, and I can start a new one with a clean slate. After a trip to the bathroom, I try to get back to sleep. The fireworks slow down to small, intermittent bursts as merrymakers drive by honking their horns and screaming, "Happy New Year." It's useless to think a pillow around my ears will drown out the noise. I try anyway. Again, the only sound that's louder than the outside racket is the nagging voice in my head. Jackie! Zip it, voice. I can't take it anymore. I grab my purse, jump in the car, and head away from the city. I have no idea where I'm headed, but I have a full tank of gas and want to go as far away as my Toyota will take me. Anywhere is better than my house. Too many depressing memories, too many ghosts. I enter the freeway and head toward an old highway that leads to some small towns. I envision a tranquil, picturesque bed and breakfast where I can enjoy a good night's sleep and regroup. A misty fog surrounds the car and the temperature is dropping. I push the heater knob, but cold air glows out. The heater is either broken or I just don't remember how to turn it on. My feet grow colder by the minute. I wiggle my toes and feel a furry sensation covering my feet. Oh my gosh, I left home in my ratty red house shoes. Even worse, I look at my arms and realize I'm wearing my ridiculous nylon party animal pajamas. What possessed me to leave home looking like this? You know, I once wore mismatched shoes to work, wore mismatched dangling earrings to a party, and left home with a jumpsuit on backward, oblivious to the pocket on my back. But going out in my pajamas is a first. Jackie, what the heck are you doing? Turn the car around and get your big fat rear end back home. Running away won't accomplish anything, especially if you take yourself with you. Blinding lights, whizzing cars, and hazy fog are more than I can handle. My heart is doing a stomp dance in my chest, and I can barely breathe. I have to head home before I wreck my car or get arrested for indecent exposure. Toll road? Oh, bullcorn. I wasn't paying attention, and now I'm on a darn toll road. I look for an exit so I can turn around and head back home. After a mile or two of nervous driving, I find an off-ramp. A flashing sign greets me and declares I need to pay a toll exit. I grab a handful of coins from my console and toss them in the basket, then drive on the feeder road looking for an underpass where I can make a U-turn. The fog turns into a light rain. Hopefully music will calm me. I reach for the radio, momentarily taking my eyes off the road. When I look up, a dog runs in front of me. I hit the brakes. The car spins on the slick road, and I go a few feet. Driving 101, don't slam on the brakes, especially when the road is damp. My heart beats faster as the stomp dancers come out for an encore. The driver behind me blasts his horn, then waves his middle finger while he passes me. How rude. By now, I'm coming unhinged and begin crying. A mental breakdown. Yes, I'm having a mental breakdown. That explains my erratic behavior. The past few months have been tumultuous, to say the least. Life slapped me to the ground. And when I got back up, I realized the picture-perfect life I imagined for myself was likely ruined in the photo lab years ago. Yes, it is obvious. I am having a mental breakdown. I drive a few feet, then pull to the side of the road. I stop the car, close my eyes, take some deep breaths, say a little prayer, and try to compose myself. After a few moments, I feel calmer. I open my eyes and prepare to drive on the access road. My foot slides off the brake and hits the gas pedal, causing me to peel out. Darn house shoes, more spinning on the damp road and more swerving. Then comes the ominous woo-woo, woo-woo siren noise and red and blue flashing lights behind me. Yikes! A police car pulls me over. The stomp dancers in my chest pick up their pace to a supersonic speed. I take several deep breaths as I look in the rearview mirror and watch an officer walk toward my car. I roll down my window and turn on the interior light. He leans into my window. Good evening, ma'am. He pauses, then corrects himself. It's morning, so good morning. Good morning, officer. My car's interior lights allow me to identify him. He is young, black, and has a wholesome face. His name tag reads Nelson. I observe you swerving on the road. Did you do too much New Year's Eve celebrating? I tremble and do my best to appear composed and sober. Officer, first, a dog ran out in the road and my car skidded when I hit the brakes. Then my foot slipped off the brake and I accidentally hit the gas pedal. I promise you, I haven't been drinking. ID, please. He circles the inside of my car with his flashlight. I grab my purse and dig through the junk, searching for my wallet. Oh, crapola. I took it out the other day to pay for the pizza delivery and forgot to put it back. I'm sorry, officer. I left my wallet at home. He takes a step back. Ma'am, I need you to exit the car. I hesitate, wondering what he'll think when he sees my party animal attire. He blinds me with his flashlight and opens the door. Ma'am, I asked you to exit the car, so please step out. His words seem harsh, but his tone is calm. I can tell he's a nice guy trying to do his job. I swing my feet around to make a graceful exit. Instead, I ungracefully stumble out. Are you sure you haven't been drinking? Oh dear, I hope I'm not drunk on Gina's liquored up fruitcake. So I'll leave you all to wonder what happens next. Maybe tomorrow's headlines are, woman arrested for indecent exposure and driving under the influence of fruitcake.
Yeah. The title is starting to make more sense for the book now. Thank you for that. That's entertaining. And so I'm curious, I think any good writer finds that, that their characters take a hold of the story at some point. So were your characters based on anyone particular or a composite of people you know, or did they just really?
Yeah, sort of amalgamation of people I know. And I will have to admit, Jackie's sort of an alter ego. I used a lot of myself, but then also did things that I would never do. And what were the things I kind of sort of did I don't want, this is my story, I need Jackie's story. And what would have happened to me if I took a different direction sometimes in life? So I just took down that path, and I did start out with a few friends in mind, but really after a while you're just making them up, and it was fun. They just took me in a different direction.
Beautiful. Yeah. Following the what if. I love that. That's a great strategy. So we want to open it up here. If anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Jenny, now would be the time to just unmute yourself and go ahead, or you can throw it in the chat and I'll ask it for you if you prefer.
Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay. I was just wondering, I didn't catch the name of your book, Jenny. What is the name of your book?
Just Jackie. My life is like a fruitcake.
What else could it be? Thank you.
That wasn't the original title by a long shot, but that's the one I ended up with a month before I went to publication.
I think it's a good name.
That's great. Yeah, and people can get that on Amazon, I would imagine, or
yes,
All right.
It's available in print, ebook, or ebook.
All right, that's super.
So you said you started writing when you were 12?
Yes.
So what made you decide to write that so young?
I don't know. I'm on a writer's forum, and the other day somebody posted the question, did you come out of the womb writing, or did it something you learned? And I thought, I think I came out of the womb writing, but my background is I've written everything. I mean, I've been in radio, television, publications, newspapers. I've been a newspaper editor. I've been everything. And I studied all kinds of writing, and I took a graduate course in playwriting because there was a time I decided to be a playwright. And that instructor said, your style of writing is better for screen. So then I took a screenwriting class, and I did this as an adult. This was way, not that many years ago. And that's what I had the basis was that the screenplay I wrote. And I had never studied how to write a novel, okay? And it's a lot different than what I'm used to. And writing a screenplay and a play are much easier because you focus on the dialogue. You know right over here what the room looks like and what the dress like and everything. But in a book, in a novel, you've got to describe that. And my first draft, I had a focus group of people that read it and gave you feedback, and it was like too journalistic. You've got to show your story, not tell your story. And I did hire an editor, and that was like I was like her private tutor, is what I class. And I learned a lot from her, and I feel like I had a graduate course in that before this was over with. So, I enjoyed
editors.
it.
Wow.
Good editors are worth their weight in gold. Absolutely.
And I had a wonderful, before it was over, I had worked with two, actually altogether 4 editors, but not at the same time. And I turned it over because there was a final person who, once it was ready for publication, did another proofread and editing too. So, here in the States, we have this thing called Chicago Manual of Style. And if you're going to publish a book, you've got to follow it. And, I'm used to Associated Press style, and they're very different. So I had a lot to learn.
Hey, Jenny, I got a question for you. Are you willing to encourage the rest of us who are working on our first novels and say how how old you were when you first published this novel?
74
Wow.
last month.
Yeah,
Oh,
never
there's
too
one.
late.
Oh wait, you don't look it. You look about 29 and holding.
Well, I tell you, I was 72 when I started it, and I had a lot of encouragement. One of my journalism teachers at college was he was a columnist. He wrote a lot of books, tons of books about Texas and Texas folklore and things. And he was 99 and writing his last book.
Wow.
And I thought, if he can do it at 99, he died 4 months after it came out. But so I thought, if he could do it at his age, I can certainly do it at my age.
Mhm. Totally.
Why
Beautiful.
I have
Yeah, never too late. Absolutely. And you know, I think when we're younger, we think we know so much and we're more keen to write. But when we're older, we know a little bit more, I think. And it's probably a better time to be writing things.
Well, I will be perfectly honest. I have the attention span of a gnat. And that's
Mhm.
why I like short projects, you know, a news release, a news story, a feature, you're done. If it had not been for a pandemic and me stuck at home, I'm not sure I would have ever finished it.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of people got those bigger projects done under the
Mhm.
shutdown, for sure.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
a question
I
for
had
you.
a question, yeah.
Question. I wondered how you decided on point of view.
I wrote it in first person.
Mhm.
And I don't know, that just suited me better because it's the character talking. And I know that's kind of challenging, but I did. One of the things I also had to learn, and my editor was getting, you know, it's tense. What tense are you writing? Because in my mind, I was telling something in the present about something in the past. And once she started showing and teaching me about tense, I did something very daring with this because this book starts out in the present. So what I just read to you is the present tense because it was happening right there in the first 2 chapters. And then everything is in flashback until the last chapter. And everything in between the first and last chapters, I wrote in past tense. And when I wrote the last chapter, it was the present tense. And I think it worked. The readers liked it. And some people didn't even notice that I kind of switched, you know, but that was one of the things I chose to try.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah, sort of bracketed it with the present tense and then the
Mhm.
story from the past in the middle. Sweet.
Mhm.
Sweet. Any other questions out there?
Oh, yeah, I had a question.
Kathleen?
I was just interested. Have you lived all your life in Texas? And how much of Texas do you think is in your work?
Oh, a lot of Texas. It takes place in Houston, and I lived in Houston. That's where I started my professional career. I was in Houston. I have lived in Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri, too. But I did not make it through my first winter. I said, get me back to Houston. And Texans are wusses when it comes to cold weather. You know, we had a horrible winter freeze yesterday, a horrible winter storm, I should say. It got all the way down to 34. You would call it a nice spring day.
Well, yeah, so in Celsius, that'd be about 1 or 2 degrees, right? for those who are maybe not used to converting. Yeah, wow. Well, you had a really nasty wallop last year, wasn't it? When the big power outage happened, that was
We
brutal.
did. It was awful. I had to replace all my plants.
Yeah,
A few made it and survived, but we're not used to that down here,
yeah,
especially as far south as I am.
yeah. Anyway, I think the common wisdom is write what you know about. So setting it in Texas is perfect, and I could listen to you read all night just because I love your accent. it suits the story absolutely. Yeah. So last chance for questions there. Anybody? Nope. Okay. Well, I think we're going to say thank you so much, Jenny. We're going to let you go and enjoy your evening. Stay with us
Well,
if you can.
I'm going to stay with you. Yes, I'm staying with
Awesome.
you.
Awesome.
I'll
That's
mute
great.
myself now and say thanks again to everyone. It's
All
been a
right.
great time.
Great. Go grab yourself a piece of fruitcake and settle in. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to move on to our second featured reader tonight, and that's it's going to be a bit of shifting gears here. We're going into some poetry. We've got Wendy Donawa from Victoria joining us, and so glad to have you on here, Wendy. I know we tried to line you up last year and things didn't really work out, so I'm so happy you could jump in this year and get us off on the right foot for 2022 with some poetry. So, and congratulations again on the shortlisting on, I think you had 2 poems in the long list and then 1 in the short list, for the Fed contest. So that's awesome. Really good. So tonight, I believe you're going to read to us from, let me just make sure that I get this correct here. So your first book was Thin Air of the Noble, and that one almost got the Joe Lampert Award. That was sweet. And then this one is Our Bodies Unanswered Questions. Yeah, this is your book that just came out at the end of last year, I believe, right? There it is. Beautiful. All right, so I'm going to let you have the full screen for about 10 minutes or so, as much as you feel like reading, and then we'll open it up for some questions again and go from there. It's all yours.
Very much. And thank you, Jenny, for your reading, and the open mic readers for theirs, and the Electric Mermaid. I have a confession, because I thought I had 20 minutes. So while Jenny was reading, I was doing a quick edit. And I'm going to read every other poem and hope it gets me back to my legal 10 minutes. And I'll start with some advice from my mother. My mother said, "Wait till your father gets home." I combed out the cat. He's horking up hairballs behind the Chesterfield. If you keep making that face, it'll stay that way. Don't use that tone with me, young lady. I wish he wouldn't call me the wife. If you don't sit up straight, I'll put sticky tape between your shoulder blades. I don't know where the time has gone. Who parked that wad of gum under the counter? Who? Really? I wonder why I bother. Your dad's having a lie down. A nice steamed pudding, dear, with brown sugar sauce, don't you think? I know now he lacked self-esteem, but you see, we didn't have self-esteem in those days. Love, love, love those little quail scuttling across the garden. Don't let the cat out. Anyone who has driven from the coast over the Rockies to the prairies will be familiar with the strange sensation of these seasonal changes going backwards and forwards as you drive up and down mountains. Time also went backwards. For years, drawn by the magnetic pole of contracts teaching in the Kootenays and a lover on the plains, I swung east from the coast to cross 3 mountain ranges, crossed an ancient seabed, flat with grain, and back again, a pendulum marking my seasons, although time also went backwards when I climbed from spring green farmlands through foothills, first buds on their winter branches, past the snow line, heaped and dirty on its verges, climbed into a silent white world, its arctic blue shadows. Then down into spring again, a metronome, the hours clicked on, kept pace with CBC's docks and weather reports, kept ahead of squalls and snow flurries as I crossed time zones, and long silences as I moved in and out of range, the frequency infrequent, so I often missed the point of interviews and seldom knew how documentaries ended. A nomad following food sources, I tracked the best coffee houses, Salmon Arm, Golden, field with its fossil-bearing overhang of Burgess shale beacons welcome as a notchooks. An evenness of time, fatigue, boredom, erratically punctuated by disasters. Once left the coast before daybreak, turned the radio off and sang along with Leonard's CDs, only coming down the old highway switchbacks into the Okanagan did I tune into a science fiction nightmare of plane attacks and crumbling buildings. It was 9/11, all the way to Lethbridge. I had no one to tell. Another trek coincided with Jack Layton's funeral. I'd liked Le Bon Jack and wept along with the bereaved and their careful accolades as I drove in and out of radio reception. It seemed disrespectful to stop for coffee. And I remembered all the other funerals, how when time came to decant my mother's ashes in the churchyard, the canister lid jammed, how an unseemly tussle ensued, as though unscrewing a stuck mayonnaise jar. So when it finally came off, a cloud of ashes scattered like confetti. This poem is a pantoum where the second and fourth lines of each stanza become the first and third of the next, so that each line is repeated but in a different context and the meaning shifts. The Eye of God, which is this poem, is a helix nebula 700 light years away. And it's my metaphor for the algorithms that now seem to have recorded all our root moves and every event in our lives and obliterated all our privacy. Their all-seeing lenses seem to have replaced any sense of universal dignity, and I express my outrage in this pantoum. Eye of God. I trundle my suitcase down the late-night corridor. Its regiment of coned lights, a constellation of virtual eyes, tracks my progress. Whose regiment of coned lights watch me rummage for keys, yawning, tracks my progress, records my life's minutiae? I rummage for keys, yawning. Where do they all go, these records, my life's minutiae? Perhaps to a modern book of days logging in data. Where do they all go? These proofs I tie shoelaces, exit parkades. Perhaps to a modern book of days, logging in data when I choose avocados in the marketplace, tie shoelaces, exit parkades. As some cosmic coder in his basement notes, I choose avocado in the markets. Files them with conspiracy theories. Some coder in his basement, cosmic, or perhaps some sort of kitchen drawer filled with conspiracy theories, pencil stubs, and unsorted baseball cards. Perhaps some sort of kitchen drawer. Opus Dei. There is, of course, no watcher in the basement with pencil stubs and unsorted baseball cards. No homunculus in the machine. Opus Dei. There is, of course, no watcher in the basement, though drones scour forested borders. No homunculus in the machine, yet there will be judgment. While drones scour forested borders, track caribou migrations and frostbitten migrants, there will yet be judgment as airports scan irises of frightened exiles. Caribou migrations and frostbitten migrants, Eye of God, the Helix Nebula watches while airports scan irises of frightened exiles. It sees the little sparrows fall. Eye of God, The Helix Nebula watches us 700 light years away. Its surveillance offers nothing, though it sees the little sparrows fall, also tailing ponds clogged with swans. 700 light years away, surveillance offers nothing, useless as the drones bringing us tailing ponds clogged with swans and Rohingya huddling under monsoon tarps. Useless as the drones bringing us binary codes on glowing screens, Rohingya huddling under monsoon tarps, misery's parcel, an assembly line of binary codes on glowing screens, a constellation of virtual eyes, misery's parcel, an assembly line where I trundle my suitcase down the late night corridor. Vespers for Tent City. Sorry, the pages just fell out of the book here. In 2015 and 16 in Victoria, there was a semi-legal settlement of homeless people who pitched their tents in between the cathedral and the courthouse. They resisted eviction for nearly a year, and I found it ironic that they were sandwiched in between the two major sources of institutional, legal, and moral justice. Vespers for Tent City. It's not hard to bless that polytented tribe of misery clinging to the sodden field, sandwiched between cathedral and courthouse. Flimsy tents flinch, exhale, and in gales blow flattened on the mud or knotted against oaks. When the wind drops, shreds of canticles and kyries drift from the liturgical east, court-bound sirens from the west. At night, a tinny wail from someone's radio, arc of sparks where smokers huddle, thud of rain on plywood, while surging runnels race the street's steep slope. Bless hard faces of the young in doorways, their swagger and bravado. No worst, there is none, for those aged out of what the world calls care. And recently, another man-child, the size and color of my grandson, has been gunned down for failure to comply. Kyrie eleison, bless holiness from the storm. Bless holiness of shelter from the storm. We've been living in dark times. I'm sorry, I tried to reassemble my 10 poems into 5. Here it is. The day the Syrian child washed ashore. And will anyone ever forget that photograph of the little boy on the beach? And I think words are inadequate, so this poem does not describe that. Instead, it looks at all the pleasures and treasures of the life he will never have. And it is difficult to reconcile the darkness and violence of our present historical moment with the beauty of the landscape around us and the blessings we are able to enjoy. Indeed, it is irreconcilable. The day the Syrian child washed ashore, the early light flushed my lover's face, and we ate late strawberries with breakfast. The changeable day rolled mist along the inlet, then channeled sun stitched by kingfishers. We breathed so easily, prowled a bookstore, later worked at heaped desks in amiable solitude, chopped herbs to roast with chicken while the sky faded, while Palestrina webbed the air, while the shushing tide brought him in, shoes still snug on his small feet. And I'll close with something a little lighter so we don't leave depressed. I love weird collective nouns, and I've written a number of poems for an excuse to use them. So I had a couple of these, but I'll finish with one. You may or may not know that a group of hawks is a kettle of hawks. So, kettle of hawks. Hawks choose open fields, desert, the plunge and rend of prey, though they can live anywhere, even this canyon of condos. I looked up from my book as he lit on the balcony, arm's length away. His yellow glare seized me. What threw his flight path awry? What of me did his vision inhale? Detector of ultraviolet, of magnetic fields, his fovea in large focus fourfold. What poems might I write with that arsenal? Perhaps he saw a poor, bland creature, mole blind, without the four receptors bringing him hues beyond our spectrum. We don't even have a word for them. Perhaps his augmented focus on my jugular vein, its blood throb, evinced a brief interest. My slow finger kept its place in the book as he dismissed the mammal in its glass cage, returned to kinetic memories, his kettle of hawks, wheeling and swirling in the thermals, curling up and up while mating until they latch and free fall. Who would not choose that huge ecstasy? Thank you.
Wonderful. Very, very uplifting one to end on. Thank you so much, Wendy. Powerful poems, very powerful. I was just looking at what Lorna Crozier had said about your poems. Fiery calls to action in a world rife with inequity and injustice. This is the kind of beacon we need, unwavering, uncompromising, and fiercely wise. And yeah, couldn't be said better. That those poems are very powerful and so spot on. I'm going to open it up for those who might have questions. For Wendy, anybody out there want to jump in? I remember when we did a workshop together a few years back, and you were saying every poem that you were writing, you tended to end up into the environmental theme. At that point, the environmental focus was huge for you, and I think they obviously branched out, but the political ends up being there, and I really applaud your ability to pierce into those issues and illuminate them, right, in short poems, very difficult to do in a way that doesn't become, preachy or pedantic or, righteously indignant, yet they have that passion and fire in them. So, I was really moved by those poems. Jackie, did you have, I see your,
Yes, I do. Oh, Wendy, wonderful. Thank you so much and really appreciate you being with us. I have a question for you. It has to do with how much editing goes into a poem or into your work after you first got it down? How much more time does it get? Thank you.
The writing it and getting it down is the first. I can go on for months with a poem, but I think even the simplest ones, probably I go through at least a dozen times over a few weeks. And then certainly for a book, I get a professional editor to go through as well. And then I still find I need to change something. And even when it comes out like this, I open it and I think, I should have changed that word. So I think it's never ending, but there's a point where you say, if I don't stop, you know, it'll never stop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Remember Patrick Lane used to say a lot of his poems, he rarely had to do any editing to them. And I just thought, oh my God, that must be wonderful. But yeah, I feel the polish in yours, and yeah, it doesn't feel like there's much room to change too many words. they've been honed, absolutely honed. Yeah. Anyone else have a question out there? No. Okay. Robert,
when did you start writing?
Oh.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Karl.
When did you start to write? Like what age were you?
I've always written. I've always loved poetry, and in my other life, I mostly taught in English literature, so I encountered a lot. But I think it was when I started working with Patrick Lane in 2007 that I really thought, you know, it just took everything to such a deeper and more profound and difficult level that I've worked steadily since then.
I think there's some questions or some people have said stuff here in the chat. So, Jared, you want to read those? Go ahead.
Janice and Robert said, Wendy taught me the existence of Word Hippo, very powerful and useful online tool. Word Hippo, what's that?
Wordhippo.com is, I felt like a cheater because I've always dragged around my dictionaries and my thesaurus. It's all on Word Hippo. Any word you put in, it gives you the synonym, the antonym, words that rhyme, words of one syllable, just anything. So when you sort of have a word but you can't think of the right word, type it into Word Hippo and you'll get there more quickly.
That's great.
Beautiful.
Okay. And then Cornelia Hoogland says, Wendy, how do you balance narrative impulse with other poetic features? Great question.
A great question. And the answer is with great difficulty. I think if it's narrative, it starts out with way too much narrative. All my poems start out, much bigger than they end up. Then you need to go to a level of what the poem requires. Not what you need to say if you're feeling indignant, but what the poem needs to do to evolve. And so it's sort of working, I think, on a much different level. Or maybe even you need to do quite a bit of research that is not going to be in the poem, but which will inform the poem, to take it out of that thing which is just a kind of personal outpouring. I think writing as therapy is great, but it's therapy, it's not poetry. So it needs to be taken in a different direction with a lot more discipline before you need to let it loose on the world.
Laura Sturgeon said, I like how a poem was created from a touching photograph, and having sat with you and listened to you in a workshop, really grateful for any tips that you have on that idea for any of us that would like to do something like that. What would you suggest?
I sometimes start with a whole lot of free writing. And as you probably found yourself, after 4, 5, 6 minutes, I think the back brain begins to take over and things may float up that you hadn't expected. I guess another way is to never stop reading fine poetry by other people. So that people like Carolyn Forche and, you know, a number of poets like Jericho Brown, when you find yourself saying, how do they do that? And then sit down and unpack it, how they do that, and can use them with some models. I don't think there's any one hint. I think just to keep yourself thinking and writing and working, and seeing what comes up. And sometimes something will come up that will take you in another direction. In fact, I think often poems do that.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you. My chat had frozen, so I had missed those questions. So thank goodness somebody pointed that out. That's great. All right, I think we're going to have to move on if we're going to get all our open mic readers in, but I just want to say thank you so much, Wendy. That was delightful and uplifting even in its darkness. So
Well,
thank you for coming to Electric Mermaid. Appreciate it. Yeah. All right, so I think we kind of pop back to the beginning of the list now, and Linda Glazier has been so patient about waiting while we readjusted things to accommodate everyone. So Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you now and give you your 5 minutes of spotlight there. So go ahead and unmute yourself, and Char will bring you up, I'm sure. Can you hit your unmute button there? Down in the lower left-hand corner, a little red microphone with the line through it. There we go.
Okay. So this is my first time at Electric Mermaid. I grew up in Port Alberni, where your club starts, and I live in Qualicum Beach on the east side of the island. And my working career was in dentistry, and so writing short stories was always something that I did on the side and threw in the closet. So you can imagine the size of the box I had after so many years of doing that. But I did some interesting things, like taking interviews of my mom and my stepdad and my uncle, who was a fur trapper. And I took a lot of interviews, but threw it in the closet. So after I retired, I wasn't sure what to do with myself, because I was, always working or looking after a family. And I found it really hard the first year. What am I going to do with myself? Just cooking and baking and gardening wasn't going to do it. And my husband encouraged me to start writing. And I argued with him for months. I said, no, that time is gone. Like, it's gone. And he persisted, and I started. So I'm very glad he did, because I've never been, well, I shouldn't say never. I've seldom been happier than I am now. I like to write contemporary women's fiction that reveals how women who avoid conflicts whenever possible in their relationships find the confidence in themselves to voice their opinions. As they become more independent, they gain the inner strength to take control and enrich their lives and those around them. So I published my first trilogy in October of 2021 under my maiden name, Lynn Boyer. I'm going to read a brief synopsis of the first in the series, All for Love, and then I'll just read another page. So this is the idea behind it. Climate migrants from the southern United States are overwhelming Washington State's infrastructure, causing shortages and chaos in every walk of life. Matt Taylor is a successful dentist obsessed with controlling his family's future. He trusts his church, who advises everyone to isolate and save their traditional ways. He accuses his wife, Anna, of living in a rapidly shrinking bubble of safety while she focuses on saving one person at a time as a nurse. So I'll jump into, so behind her back, he begins to build a safe haven that he wants to escape to with his family and close friends. But he knows his wife wouldn't agree, and so he goes about it whatever way he has to. So background on this is that Matt has taken his wife to a ski chalet, and they spent a very, very romantic weekend together, and she's feeling that all the he's been not present in their family life, and she feels that they've rekindled their marriage. And he's just told her what he's been doing. Anna's voice trembled with fervor. We can't give up, throw our hands in the air and walk away because we have problems. Sweetheart, I'm sorry, but you're deluded if you think there's going to be a solution anytime soon. One way or another, this is going to blow up. Matthew, enough. Anna jumped up and ran along the riverbank away from him. Matt sprinted after her and put his hand on her shoulder. Please, stop. No, you accused me of being delusional. I could say the same about you. After this wonderful weekend, I'm stunned with all of this. Anna began to sob, tears running down her cheeks. Angrily, she swiped them away. What was this weekend? I thought it was a rekindling of our marriage, but now I think you were saying goodbye to all the things we've shared together. I just don't understand. I knew this would be hard on you, sweetheart, so I delayed explaining until I really had to. You might as well hear the rest of it. Do you want to keep walking, or would you like to sit down? I think I'd rather walk, thank you. So what else have you been lying to me about? I haven't been lying, Anna. Matt searched for the right words. It's more an admission of truth. I didn't want you to worry about things like I had to. Good excuse. Good excuse maybe, but it's the truth. I decided to use my grandfather's property in Bella Coola to build a retreat. Matt had a hard time looking at Anna. Her disappointment in him seared his heart. He rubbed his chin and tried to pick his words even more carefully. Once I decided to do this, I contacted my old friend Thomas in Bella Coola. Without his help and that of Ray down here, I'd never been able to bring this project about. And you didn't think it was important enough for me to know, to have a say in our family's future? He shook his head. I didn't need arguments, Anna. I knew what had to be done. I needed to focus and do it as fast as I could. I've used my inheritance from my parents and cashed in my 401ks for startup capital. Oh no, your retirement savings are gone? Are you crazy? And for what? Some hippie commune in the middle of nowhere? And what's my role in this? If you think I'm going to be a meek little wife letting her husband make all the decisions, then you're in for a surprise. It's not going to be like that, I promise. I need you to think about this without a lot of emotion. We'll be safe. We'll be part of a network of communities who will isolate and protect our way of life. We'll probably come back eventually, once the chaos has passed, or we may stay there and make our future there.
Linda, I'm going to have to stop you there. We're running out of time, but thank you so much. That was a real little tidbit to get me enticed. I want to read it all now. Awesome. Thank you, and thank you so much for joining us. I hope you come back to Electric Mermaid again. We're here every month, so we'd love to have you join us regularly. And we can even maybe get you a spotlight session for a 10-minute or do a feature down the road. So, okay, thank you. All right, our next open micer is going to be Kathleen Vance, coming to us from Gibson's.
Okay.
What are you going to share tonight, Kathleen?
Just a piece.
All
All right. Mars, Anne, you want to go ice skating? Billy asked. The pond's frozen in the field. You can borrow my mom's and my dad's skates. Will their skates fit us? Mars asked. Nah, nobody's skates fit. You just wear more socks. Let's go, Billy said. I think it's cold enough today. Although they say never go skating on a duck pond because the ice might quack. Get it? Ann and Mars were soon going to find out how close to the truth Billy's latest pun was. The three kids stomped across the cold field with their skates. Ann loved the way the ice felt under her skates and the way it quickly carried her to the middle of the pond. She heard the cold wind crossing the field and felt it hit her in the face. Then she smelled something a bit moldy, like the old leaves at the end of fall. She almost crashed into it because suddenly it was right in front of her. Look at this pile of sticks and branches. It's all stuck together with mud and rocks, Ann shouted to Billy and Mars. It's a beaver lodge, Billy said. That's what you call a beaver's house. How did they get into their house in the middle of the pond? Where's the door? Mars wanted to know. They swim in from the bottom, Billy said. Oh, look! Ann couldn't believe it. She skated backwards in surprise. There under the ice was a real beaver swimming. Its back feet were like the web feet of her duck at home, and it was using its feet to swim in the water. It had a flat tail, and in its mouth it held a small branch. It was as big as a really big cat, and it was brown and shiny. It was the most beautiful animal Ann had ever seen in her whole life. Is it going to use that branch to build its house? Mars asked. I hope not. Its house should be all finished for this year. That branch is just a special treat to eat, Billy said. Beavers like to eat grass, leaves, and twigs. I've read a lot about beavers. I like them. They're called nature's engineers. We learned in my old school that the fur trade by the colonists killed millions of beavers, almost all of them, but they're protected now, Mars said. Be quiet and come see this, Billy said. He led them around to a hole, a kind of chimney on the top of the pile of sticks and branches. I see smoke. They can't have a fire in there, Ann said. Nah, that's their breath. Just like you can see your own breath on a cold day. The beavers are in there breathing, Billy explained. Ann, Mars, and Billy stood there quietly, each thinking of the beavers living and breathing so close to them. Some of them maybe even swimming right under their skates. Ann and Mars looked at each other, each thinking, this is magic. A thought which made Ann a little bit scared. I'll race you, Billy cried and sped ahead along the ice. Ann and Mars followed until they suddenly heard it. The ice was cracking, a little at first, a tiny crack. Then the cracks got louder and started spreading. Ann and Mars shouted at Billy, who was far ahead. Then Billy fell, and it looked like he was going through the ice into the water. Ann remembered a story she read about a kid saving another kid who had fallen through the ice. From the story, she knew that she had to get a branch for the kid to hang on to so she could pull the kid out of the water across the ice to the shore. And she had to move fast because, according to the story, the kid would go under the water 3 times. And when the kid went under the water for the 3rd time, the kid was a goner, unless the other kid pulled the kid out of the water. Ann raced to the beaver lodge and pulled at one of the branches. She could hardly move it. Billy would say those damn beaver houses are almost impossible to take apart. Thinking of Billy made Ann try even harder. She kept pulling and pulling, trying to get the branch free. Help me, Mars, we're running out of time. I've got to get this branch, Ann shouted. Mars and Ann together finally pulled the branch free. Spread out, skate slowly so we don't make more cracks in the ice, Ann told Mars. Finally, they reached Billy, who was leaning on the ice. Ann hoped he wouldn't get too tired and slip off the ice and go under the water. And if he did, Ann hoped it would be just for the 1st or 2nd time and not for the 3rd time. Ann and Mars both lay flat on the ice so they wouldn't break it. And that's all that fits in 5 minutes. So you won't know whether or not Billy drowned.
Oh my God, I'm not going to sleep till next month.
Who knows? It might be in a book one day.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Kathleen. That was great. All right, and our next reader up is our partner David Kipling, coming from Gibson's Landing as well. Good evening, David. Oh, you're muted. There we are.
Right. Oh, I'm allowed. Okay.
No, I muted you. No, I didn't.
Okay.
No, good.
Right, he screamed at me. Right, for Christ's sake, or we're dead. I've never felt a wind like it. The grit and leaves shotgunning our faces as we clung to the horses. I was out of my mind. Where the hell did the horses come from anyway? Oh yes, that farmer, poor sod. We pushed him aside when we leaped from the wreck of the burning chopper, and we'd left him cursing in the mud and straw of his stockyard, bolting the stable door after his best mare and filly. Right more, my companion, damn him, leaned from his saddle beside me and bellowed across, showing his yellowing teeth. Right, for God's sake. The thudding hooves showered us with grass and dirt and gravel until we reached the valley floor, our spines and the horses' forelegs jarring against the packed earth we met at the bottom of the slope. The darkening clouds were already choking the hilltops, dimming the orange glare of a burning church, and now a dying sunlight barely filtered through. Blood suddenly showed in my horse's flying foam, and the beast took a slow, crumbling dive of muscle and bone onto the roadway, and I rolled free. My heavy gun slid out of its holster and skittered out of reach into the flooded ditch. Caspar swung a booted stirrup at my head and lashed out with his whip, shouting, "Right, I told you to bloody right, you feeble failure, or is the pen for both of us." He was panicking, mindless, and he was soon going to be a liability. Pressing the stainless steel bolt of the humane killer against my horse's writhing head, I sent it to oblivion. At the side of the road, an empty motorcycle leaned on its stand, and it took me only a moment to throw off the plastic sheet, kickstart it, and fishtail away at full throttle. It was more unwieldy, heavier than I'd expected, despite the desperate bark of the twin-cylinder Triumph engine. Why so sluggish? An arm suddenly half-circled my waist, and a second helmet bumped against the back of my own. Through the exhaust note and gale, I heard a familiar curse. "Right, keep writing or we're dead. You said you could write, for God's sake." I twisted my neck and yelled back, "Where's your pen, you parasite? Earn your keep. The agreement was half and half, so put your pen where your mouth is." That silenced him for a long moment as we burst through the flimsy plywood obstacles the roving gangs of booksellers and reviewers were tossing in our way. The fast crack, crack, crack of a manual Remington made us duck, then the unmistakable smack of an Olivetti set on automatic. Almost night now, forks of lightning spattering the foothills, and at last a powerful headlight finally picked out the giant hoardings strung on cables straggling the highway. In Gothic script, which our jacket design artist had sworn he would not use this time, our working title blazed across the landscape, "Writers of the Storm." As we crossed the swaying wooden plank bridge high above the churning torrent, I drove an elbow backwards hard and heard a gasp and felt the bike lighten. I muttered into my mini-corders microphone, "Note for sub-editor, make that title singular, not plural."
Wow, that was a real diversion for you, David. Thank you. Out of realism into that. I loved it. That was sweet. Okay, we're going to move along now. We've got our spotlight reader for tonight. Actually, in LUMA'S spotlight there, we've got Laura Sturgeon. There you are, Laura. And hi, how are you doing tonight?
Unmute. Am I unmuted? Okay.
You're unmuted. You're good now.
I'm doing well. It's good to see everybody. It's been a while.
Yeah, good to see you. Are you going to read a little bit from Alone in the Castle tonight?
I didn't know if that's what I was going to do. So what I was going to do was kind of read a bit from my first book here. I mean, I know Castle just came out, but I was hoping to kind of do that like the next time or whenever I'm a feature.
Sure, yeah.
So,
No pressure.
Yeah. So this book here in Bloom was my first book. So it's just a collection of short stories, and there's going to be about 4 of them in like another anthology at some point, but 2 of them were turned into novelettes. So I wanted to just kind of introduce this booklet, and then just read a little bit from another story that's going to be turned into part of the compilation.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, take it away.
Okay. So this first book in Bloom, I wrote ages ago, probably about 10 years ago. It's a collection of short stories. And so then a couple of them were turned into novelettes. And this one is called A Nickel a Bucket. And I was inspired by this one because my very favorite book of all time is The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck. And I'm really fascinated with the Great Depression. So I wrote a story about a couple of kids during the Great Depression, and they're like apple pickers and whatnot. So all I'm going to do with this novelette is that I'm just going to read the back of it, and I'm not going to read any excerpts of this one, but I'm going to read a bit of an excerpt from another one. So this one is, it's the era of the Great Depression, and apple picking season is coming to an end. 15-year-old James Lemley and his family works tirelessly from sunup until dinner time, picking as many apples as they can to earn a small wage, afford food, and save up enough money for when it comes time to move on. But where will they end up next? When every year is a different location, a different farm, the Birchard farm is their only constant. Unfortunately, James is seriously injured, disallowing him to contribute to the family income. Is the Lemley family doomed to a life of continued poverty, or will their luck soon turn around? So it does turn around, so there's that. And okay, so, and in Bloom here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stories in it. So the one I'm going to read from is Jason's Bugs, and it is here. Jason's Bugs. Okay. Upon Jason Midland's arrival, numerous comments and opinions swirled about the atmosphere in a whirlwind of mixed emotions. Derek was excited. He was no longer the only male stranded under the same roof as 5 females. Tanya shut her eyes and crossed her fingers, chanting, "I hope he's cute, I hope he's cute." Michelle and Sarah's faces were as mirror image of wrinkled foreheads and eyebrows positioned to an angry V. They often complained as to how someone new ended up with their own room when they have had to share one for 8 months. Mum was quiet. There was a reason why we were all here, but Mum wouldn't divulge Jason's. Not that she'd mention much whenever a new person arrived, but when it came to Jason, she gave no hints whatsoever. At least she'd keep quiet until her and I were alone. Once the opportunity arose, she'd let me in on whatever knowledge she had obtained. She knew I would never spread his secrets or use them against him. Neither of us could say the same for the others. I was Mom's only confidant, the only one who would listen with mature ears and be understanding of every one of the foster children's situations. At least every child up to this point. This time around, I was upset. Understanding was the last thing I could convey. I didn't want him here. If he was a child, I wouldn't have a problem with his arrival, but he was no young innocent boy needing a safe temporary home. Jason was a fully grown man of 19 years. A peace offering was placed before me. I looked at a plate of chocolate chip cookies and then attempted a smile for Mom's sake. Although they were to be shared with everyone, like everything else in the house, she bought them because she knew they were my favorite. It looked like she took some cookies out of the bag as soon as she came through the front door. The groceries she bought weren't even put away yet. Canned items were stacked on the counters and bags half full of produce lay tipped over on the floor. That's the kind of person Mom was. Whenever someone was in need of something, whether it was a place to stay, a hug, a kind word, or even a little treat, she would do whatever she could to try and make them happy. Unfortunately, that was the reason why I was so upset with her. I love my mom. She has a heart of gold, but with this particular situation, I wish that this one time her heart would have hardened over the idea of allowing a guy Jason's age to stay here, especially with 5 females in the house. After what happened to me, how could she even think of doing something so risky? But when I looked at Mom, her gentle blue eyes gave me the answer Jason had a need. Whatever that need was, I knew that Mom would never forgive herself if she didn't try to fulfill it. There was no point in continuing avoiding her. Jason was now here, and I knew he wasn't going anywhere. no matter how much I protested. Mom drooped down onto a chair across from me. She let out a long breath and allowed her arms to dangle downward, her hands almost touching the floor. Sorry, I meant to bake up a batch earlier, but it's been such a hectic day around here all day. I haven't had a single moment, she said. The feeling of shame took over me because of my recent behavior. She seemed to have forgotten everything, despite my slamming of doors, shunned her presence, and constant shouts through my bedroom door of, how could you? For the second eldest in the household, I hadn't been acting very mature. No, these cookies are just as good as if you'd baked them. Thank you, I replied as pleasantly as I could. She sat up and said sincerely, I hope you're not mad at me anymore. The last thing I wanted to do was upset you. I know, Mom, I said. So you forgive me? It wasn't you I was really mad at. It was the situation. She moved closer to me and rested her chin on her hand. It is a challenging situation for all of us, I know, but you're handling it just fine, considering ... That's that
... Thank you. Okay, and it goes on.
Yeah.
Beautiful, Laura. Thank you so much for sharing that tonight.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to you coming back with some from your more recent novel as well in the near future, hopefully. And
Yeah,
that's
and
all
my
good.
picture book.
And your picture book as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Super. You're a busy gal.
I know.
Awesome. Okay, our next reader is coming in from London, Ontario. Jennifer Wenn has been waiting patiently there. It's getting a little later out in your country. Thank you for staying with us, Jennifer. And you're going to share some poetry with us tonight?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Derek.
Beautiful.
You could classify it. It's a little trilogy I'm going to read. It's one piece, but it's kind of a little trilogy. You can classify it as a pandemic piece, I guess. It was the events that motivated it were all from 2020. So one of our crazy years. It's called Triplicity, and it has 3 named subsections. And the first one is regarding a housefly. Held in the close embrace of early July heat, birdsong serenades float from the oaks down to the patio where I meander through love poems from God, glasses propped on forehead and book held close in deference to myopia. Eyes flick up and are greeted by an alighting musca domestica, a housefly doing a high wire on the page edge. We tarried there a good 10 seconds, 4 hours in fly time, eyeball to ommatidia, while its back legs scissored together in Flythian ritual ablution, a tiny embodiment of change, semaphoring, take time to notice, a strange forerunner preaching awareness. Task fulfilled, she, I feel sure about that, zipped on her way, leaving me with the other seraphic poems. Death in the Afternoon, with apologies and thanks to Ernest Hemingway and Seamus Heaney. Summer's denouement was the wasp's cue. In turn, I had, cleverly I thought, baited a fancy trap and started this sunny afternoon contentedly eyeing casualties. Next to the watering can, startled by a large arthropodic drowning victim. Per 2020, my thoughts raced to, it's a murder hornet. Per my more grounded millennial son, it was a cicada. Then past skittering chipmunks grown smug since Marcus reached the canine beyond, and to the lower part of my haven for some quality time with a lawn chair and Seamus Heaney. The imperious floop over my left shoulder startled me out of glorious poetic lyricism into conjunction with its material embodiment. Not 5 feet away, base of the stairs, down from the arbor, a magnificent red-tailed hawk glowing with athleticism and inevitability, an artist in his realm bristling with deadly intensity in this moment, had swooped underneath the oaken canopy and was now clutching a formerly complacent chipmunk in his talons. I was well and truly seen, pinioned and humbled and yet comforted under his penetrating gaze, induced to remain basking in eloquent physicality until one majestic motion launched him away. Feeling the book again in my hands, swathed in Seamus's ethereal smile. And tears. To the backyard, virtual employment left inside, mid-September glowing all around, while I drifted off to a poetic confrontation with a ghastly shade haunting a dark literary mountain whose ascent required grappling with the lost soul responsible for monstrous evil, finding myself drifting in Blakean imagery as I searched for a route to portray an inhuman, warped psyche. Filtering through the struggle, the gentle rattle of a small foot on the eaves trough, then a hopeful fluttering as I glanced up to find a young cardinal touching down scant inches away on the patio table. Startled back to sunshine, caressed by an inquiring nascent look, I said hello, was answered by a wing-born dancing spirit radiating little seraphs of light that illumine those dark crags winding upwards. After an infinite moment of communion, the herald was off to the cedar hedge, leaving me a path discernible, daunting, and destined. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. You just took me right back to Ontario. I miss cardinals. That's one thing we don't have out here. Those bursts of color. Oh my God, they're amazing. Yes. Super. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
All right. And our next reader from the Cowichan Valley, Joy Sheldon. Thank you for your patience. I hope your back is holding up okay. Oh, and you're muted. You're still muted, my dear, down in the left-hand corner. There we go.
Okay, now thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, with Valentine's Day looming momentarily, this is the first book I published, Whoopee, I'm a GRG. The little girl was wearing red. I was 61, she was 2. I'm wearing red because I'm going to do story number 18, GRG Valentine's. Heavily edited Derek to fit in exactly 4.5 minutes. I timed it. February 13th, 2012. Last night I heard the dreaded words, "Grandma, I need 28 Valentines for school tomorrow." Impossible to get those two to plan ahead. Every night for nearly a month, I'd asked, "Are you sure there's nothing else you need for Valentine's Day?" "No, Grandma." But here I stand at the dollar store checkout. The latest bit of lunacy I should simply call Valentine's Follies. What to buy, how many to buy, how to make use of last year's leftovers, how to find last year's leftovers. Especially since I've already bought 5 or 6 chocolate hearts at $1 each, $8 worth of scratch tickets, 4 adult-sized cards, both teacher and grandpa, and a Valentine gift for each kid. If I buy a large package, they should have oodles of cards left over for next year. But with approximately 28 kids in each class, you know what that means. Better to have too many than risk missing that one kid because your count fell short. And don't forget at least 2 or 3 teacher cards, 1 for each of 6 or 8 relatives, not including me and Grandpa. Not to mention the 30 or so Valentine cookies or cupcakes I'm supposed to make from scratch. So each kid and the teachers and EAs will have one, Grandma. Years ago, we had one homemade Valentine for each person, period. I'll tell you why that went the way of the dinosaur. Too much work. Oh, once in a while, the kids will get an obviously homemade missive. Don't you hate those parents, invariably young, who have time to sit down with their kids in a tablet of blank construction paper? I'd rather face a firing squad. But last night, we tried to make Valentines for one of the token aunties, circus ones. Lesson number 476 in being a GRG. Never, never, never start a project after 7 p.m. when the kids are tired, and I'm probably even more tired. This AM, I surveyed the damage. On the remains of a supper table that had been improperly wiped, of course, Kids created valentines made out of red construction paper and scrapped. They wouldn't have looked too bad if not for the obvious grease stains and the smart-ass kids' inappropriate language. I can hear the comments now. Can't that old lady make sure that her kids don't give out dirty valentines? Of both types. We ended up nixing the homemades and headed back to the store. So here I am surveying the shelf. One box of valentines also has some inappropriate language for young kids. One box of animal times. They're just too scary, Grandma, says Bobby. Bailey will say the cartoon ones are too sucky. Superhero? Bet there'll be a whole raft of them. Then there are all the gimmicks to entice us, whether we want them or not. 32 valentines with scented tattoos. Scented tattoos? Where on the body are these tattoos going to be placed? I can just see my kids now going around sniffing the other kids' body parts. And then there are the enigmatic ones. 16 valentines with 16 PJ masks. I thought we were buying cards, not pajamas. Cards punch out to become masks. 16 valentines with tattoos. 16 pencils with 16 valentines. And on it goes. Then, How to Train Your Dragon. The Hidden World of Dragons. Huh? Dragon, Hidden World? That doesn't even make sense. Are we still in the Valentine aisle? I'm starting to hate St. Valentine already. Guess I'll go to hell for that thought. For girls, Barbie and Co., The Little Mermaid, anything Disney always costs triple, of course. And for the boys, Extreme Racing and Star Wars. How far from the theme of romance we have come in the last few decades. Romeo and Juliet would be doing backflips in their graves if they read some of this stuff, not to mention the look of horror on the faces of the Brownings. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways, said Elizabeth. I guess we won't be hearing many of those sentiments anymore. We finally chose the middle of the road Arthur Valentines. Cartooning not too gross and language not too ripe for general consumption. Definitely a better idea than late nights trying to force some appropriate creativity. However, at least where kids are concerned, the romance has sure gone out of Valentine's Day. Commercialism reigns. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joy. Yeah, those days, the last minute. I gotta have this for the morning.
Yep.
Oh my God.
I did plenty of those for 12 years.
I bet. They were lucky to have you. Okay.
Thanks.
Our next reader is going to be Victoria Roscoe-Romanis, coming from Port Alberni. And Victoria, you're going to share poetry or prose with us tonight?
More prose.
Little prose tonight.
Yes. And these are things that I've written. I was
We lost you there. Somehow you got muted.
I'm mute.
Oh, there we go.
I was activity and programming coordinator at facilities for seniors. That was for almost 30 years. So many times I wrote, sometimes somebody passed away, and another thing, sometimes there were things that happened that prompted me to write. The first one is called Locked In ×2. It was mid-morning when I arrived at work. When I opened the car door, I heard the haunting deep sobs of a man crying. He was holding on to the wire fencing covering the high gate. His distress was evident, and it immediately filled me with compassion. He was probably recalling his confinement in the prison camp before his escape many years ago. I approached the gate, speaking to him with softness and reassuring words. I touched his fingers that tightly touched the wire. I wished that I had been on his side of the gate to enable me to comfort him with my arms. An army of 3 came out of the building, including security, not knowing whether they would be subjected to violence. There was no aggression in him. He was broken and weakened by his recollection of a similar caged experience in a war-torn country. With their caring and reassuring words, he was encouraged to let go of the wire and accompany them back inside. Alzheimer's is cruel. It takes away short-term memory and reasoning and causes events in the long-term memory to be even more vivid and more frightening. The person affected by Alzheimer's is totally unable to distinguish between present and past, so they relive the horrors of devastating events of the past. He was now fenced in again, seemingly imprisoned. I would like to see an alternative to the wire fencing, a planting of a hedge, trees, shrubs, and flowers. If this greenery had been present, it may have given the survivor a totally different feeling of his environment. It may also have prevented him from reaching into the dark past of his long-term memory. The gut-wrenching sobs of his incredible pain will certainly remain with me always, and my feelings of helplessness to eradicate history for him. That's the first one. The second is A Lady in Room 1056. You came to stay. I was delighted. Your happy, loving way always made my day. We sang. You were my lead singer. When I forgot the words, you were there to carry on. We danced. You never missed a beat. Your replaced hips clicked. Music brought your rhythm. We laughed. You teased. How connecting your smile. Your humor brought me life. The page, sorry, here. We hugged, our arms wrapped around, sharing needed closeness. Two friends we became. I love you. I love you too. Often you forgot your walker, glasses, and shoes. I ran, afraid you'd fall, items gathered, safe again. You were tired. I tucked you into bed, kissed your cheek, told you we would have tea when you woke. Oh, that would be lovely. Time ran out, as it will for us all. I feel a deep emptiness at your passing. You will live on, sharing a part of my heart. So richly you gave to others. Rest now, dear kitty, all your pain left behind. You have earned paradise. And the last one, my unnamed hero. Sorry, unsung, not unnamed, unsung hero. I looked, read, and was emotionally moved by your poems displayed in your exhibit. Tears flowed, yet at the same time, I found myself laughing at your humor. I felt guilty, and I told you of my mixed emotions. You said, this happens to most people when they read my poems. This was the first time I met you. Your words were powerful. In fact, your ability to use the English language was always powerful. I introduced you to my writing group, where you continue to impress and entertain with your words. You encouraged me to write poems, and I learned a lot from you, even though you were not always impressed with my work. I wasn't used to assisting you, so when on an outing, I can remember my fright when at a crowded flea market you disappeared and left me with an empty wheelchair when my back was turned. You hated being in the wheelchair, so as soon as you were mobile again, off you would go, unknown to me. I panicked. How would I explain to the seniors' home I had lost you? Needless to say, I found you at the far end of the market, bargaining with a vendor. I also lost you when I took you to UBC's to see your specialist. At the departure bay terminal, you had gone to the restroom and I stayed in the car. At loading time, you had not returned. I tried to find you, asking someone to check the men's room. You were nowhere to be found, and I assumed that you had decided to be independent and walk onto the ferry. I rushed back to the car and embarked the ferry. On board, I searched the ferry for you, but you were nowhere. The ferry was sailing, and I had lost you. Again, tell the facility where you lived. A call back to shore by the purser found you in a small games room. I found out you could not resist any form of games. At Horseshoe Bay, I had to wait for you to arrive on the next ferry. I requested that they arrange to have someone take care of you on the journey because of your illness and because I was afraid of what might happen.
Victoria, I'll have to stop you there. We're getting a little over time there, and we've got a few more readers, and it's almost 8 o'clock. So thank you so much for that.
Right.
That was good. All right. So our next reader is Bob, aka Joe Lunchbucket, coming from Port Alberni. Good evening, Bob. You'll need to unmute yourself there. Camera's good. You just need to unmute yourself in the lower left corner there, Bob.
On the other side of the mute button. I mean, on the other side of the stop button.
Unmute.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, great. Okay. Is U.S. a bastion of democracy or just bastardizes it? The corporate 1% fund both U.S. political parties, and lobbying is legal bribery. Does media monopoly manufacture consent and democracy is illusion? Is their war industry profit motive blessed by church state, where only the sons of the poor are cannon fodder since conscription was abolished? Obama administration waged more skirmishes than Republican presidents, proving that power is not prejudiced and will elect Americans of any blend that they choose. U.S. tried to annex Canada in 1812 and failed. And they bombed Vietnam with Agent Orange to save them from communism. If leaders promoting regime changes and war were tried under Nuremberg laws enacted at end of World War II, would any U.S. presidents have escaped hanging? Are we gearing up for a U.S.-China-Russian Cold War, or the real thing as China increases nuclear arsenal and North Korea tests missiles as third world hungers? Did Cuba have the right to join Soviet bloc? Should Ukraine have the right to join NATO, or will U.S. let China and Russia annex Taiwan and Ukraine like they annexed Texas? Alliances are forming, but can anyone profit from nuclear war that ends life on Earth? Will someone capitulate like Khrushchev did in U.S.-Cuban missile showdown? Or will generals try out their big boy toys in WW3? Does NATO prolong tension? Will bully nations disband it and accept UN binding arbitration before someone's itchy trigger finger downs another passenger jet? That's it.
Thank you, Bob. Provocative. Oh, my video is gone here. Hang on. There we are. Whoop, where did I go? I'm trying to start my video and it keeps going off. I don't know why that's happened. Okay, thank you, Bob. The provocative questions as always. We're hoping we're not heading to World War III, but you never know these day and age. We've got enough going on with COVID, I think, in the world. Okay, Jackie, I think we've got you in the wings. And Jackie Carmichael, our artistic director, of course, for Electric Mermaid. And I've been remiss tonight about reminding you before Jackie reads here that Char at Char's Landing could desperately need your support. So e-transfer at charslanding.com. Especially,
oh, I think she left.
Oh.
I think she's going to Mexico tomorrow, so I think she was, yeah, so.
Oh, okay. All
so
right.
Derek, you can take us off and
Jackie's
finish us
gone.
off.
All right. So, so as I was saying anyway, if you're feeling generous and you can support Char at e-transfer at charslanding.com, that would be wonderful to keep her doors open there a little bit longer. She's cheering there under Luma. All right. I'm just going to read a couple pages off a short story I'm working on. It's a little bit on the rough side yet, but I'll share it anyway. It's called Ripples, and it begins with an epigraph by Robert Bly. It says, "The door to the soul is unlocked. You do not need to please the doorkeeper. The door in front of you is yours, intended for you, and the doorkeeper obeys when spoken to." "That's got to be the place there," my wife said, and pointed at a vintage 40s stucco rancher with a pile of construction debris and old appliances in the front yard. The new front door shone like a beacon in contrast to the old walls and left us no doubt we were in the right place. I pulled into the small part of the driveway that wasn't taken up by scraps of wood or old cabinets and vehicles and switched off the engine. When we stepped onto the porch and rang the doorbell, it was answered by the whine of a skill saw from somewhere deep inside the house. As soon as the saw stopped, I listened, half expecting the whir of a drill or the ka-chunk of an air hammer as whatever piece of wood that had just been cut was screwed or nailed into place. Instead, I heard the slow thudding of tired feet making their way to the front door. The door looked classy. A new metal-clad white door that belonged in an upscale house in some wealthy suburb in a big city, rather than a working-class neighborhood in Parksville. It had etched glass panels in the top half that distorted the approaching figure into a fragmented giant. But when it swung open, the man standing in the foyer of the house was surprisingly small. His silver hair had a natural wave to it that spoke of more than a past flirtation with handsomeness, but the deep lines carved around his eyes and mouth betrayed those lost years, and the sprinkle of sawdust and trace of wood shavings dangling from the side of his head completed the portrait of a man past his prime, if not weary to his death. "Hello," he said, and looked at us expectantly. "Hi," I said, "we've come about the door you posted on Kijiji. We called about it yesterday." "All right, come on in," he said. "As you can see, I'm remodeling. It's the last thing I expected to be doing at 73, but it is what it is. I've been doing it since June, and here it's the week before Christmas already. Never mind your shoes." As we followed him into the interior of the house, I looked around the adjacent living room at the bare studs. Gyprock screws still jutted out into the room, some with small clumps of drywall attached. Dust had been swept into small strategic piles that allowed one to walk through the room without disturbing them. By the look of things, he had a long way to go before he'd be sitting back with his feet up in a finished house. "Geez, I haven't seen that green-coated wiring in years," I said, pointing at the exposed electrical wiring that ran through the studs and into the electrical outlets. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," he said with a small shake of his head. "I got my oldest boy to thank for this. Had our sights set on a nice house on the water, even had an accepted offer." A wistful smile rose and fell on his face. "Thank God my wife and I had the house in Port Moody, or we wouldn't have been able to even buy this place." At this point, I started looking around for the door we had come to pick up, but my wife, being more curious than I am, couldn't let it go. "So your son didn't want to live on the water?" No, he's not with us. In fact, he's not even in the will anymore after what he did. The funny thing is, I didn't see it coming after what had happened to our best friends in Port Moody, Pat and Angie. We had a good life there, I tell you. The house backed onto this big patch of crown land, and us and the neighbors used to hike up through there and all pile over to somebody's house afterwards for wine and cheese, mostly wine. We'd drive over in our golf cart and wind our way home hours later. It was about then I recognized that the subtle undertone of alcohol I'd been smelling since we stepped into the house was coming from him. Vodka, I guessed. It all made a little more sense then, the way he was spilling this story at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd seen it in other alcoholics I'd known, the way the filters took a sabbatical every afternoon about this time as they went into that place where free talking became a compulsion, whether anybody was really listening or not. He tugged at a loose piece of plaster on the wall and tossed it onto one of the piles on the floor. You know, my grandmother warned me years ago, he said. She said the only friends you can count on are the ones you can fold into your wallet. I didn't believe her. I didn't even believe it when Pat called me up one day out of the blue and told me Angie's son had fleeced them for half their life savings and he and Angie were getting a divorce. In fact, I remember I turned to my wife and said, that'll never happen to us. The door's over here, he said, and led us through a gutted kitchen with a stove in the middle of the floor and the wire line unplugged on the old linoleum tiles. A tall glass of orange juice sat half emptied on a green arborite counter. The door leaned against the entryway to a pantry or laundry room. I couldn't tell for sure. It looked far worse for wear than it had in the photo in Kijiji. And I'll leave it there for now. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. Thank you so much to our features, Jenny Cummings, who graciously stayed with us through the whole
Yes, thank
couple
you,
of
Jenny.
hours down there in Texas. And thank you for sharing parts of your novel with us. Thank you to Wendy Donawa down there in Victoria, who is not going to the Planet Earth Poetry. Maybe you're going to go now because you were reading with us. So, and thank you to all our other open mic readers as well. You all contribute to make such a diverse evening for everybody.
And thank you to Derek.
Well, you know, this is a highlight of the month to have a literary evening with people. It's beautiful. It's a relief.
Some good books out there. I think I'm going to have to buy some of them.
Thank Karl for being our moderator, of course, and thank you to Jackie, our artistic director, who had to leave early this evening. And thank you, of course, to Char at Char's Landing, who is our Zoom host. And may the day come soon when we're all back there again together, having a glass of wine and doing this in person.